So good morning and a warm welcome to everyone joining us on this session. This is Thematic Session 2 on Community and Nature-Based Solutions. And my name is Rosi Waqanisau. I will be your moderator for this session. And it's a pleasure for me to take us through the program. A warm welcome also to our panelists for today. We have 4 panelists. We have Jacynta from 350 Pacific. We have Kathy Jetnil-Kijiner from Jo-Jikum, Fred Wayne Fuakilau from Pacific Grow, and Noelene Nabulivou from the DIVA. So welcome panelists, and thank you very much for availing your time to come and speak on this very important gathering. Now, before we jump straight into the main part of our session, just a few parameters to set to ensure that we have a smooth run into our program. So the session will run for 60 minutes, and each speaker will be given 7 minutes to speak. And the order of our speakers, we will first have Jacynta Fa'amau. Then we will have Kathy and Fred. Then finally we'll have Noelene from the DIVA. So that is the order of our speakers for today. And to all our participants, if you have any questions, please note that the questions will be right at the end after the last speaker. We have allocated 18 minutes of the session's time for question and answers. And also, please utilize the Q&A tab on your right side, as you can see, where you can send in your questions. So let me begin. I would like to set the scene a bit for us before we jump straight into our first speaker for today. So nature-based solutions for climate harness the power of nature to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help us adapt to the impacts of climate change. They are win-win solutions that involve protecting, restoring, and sustainably managing ecosystems to address society's challenges and promote human well-being. The session will focus on the role of young people in the Pacific in implementing and amplifying nature-based solutions in the Pacific, while also addressing concerns at COP26. My apologies. I think I can hear wind gasping from someone's microphone. I'm not, I think it's Noelene. Oh, thank you. So our speakers will be talking to us today on their organizations and will be discussing to us on 3 main questions, which I will be throwing to them now. The first question is, what role do young people play in community action, empowerment, and adapting towards nature-based solutions? What are some activities or projects that your organization has been working on? What are some strategies and approaches towards communities and nature-based solutions? And how are you and your organization actively ensuring youth accompaniment, mentoring, and in your network, in your work, sorry. So those are the 3 questions. Now I will introduce our first speaker for today, Jacynta Fa'amau. So Jacynta is an Australian-born Samoan whose journey with 350.org began in 2014 for the Pacific Climate Warriors Canoe Blockade in Australia. Now currently working as 350 Pacific campaigner. Sorry, my apologies. I can see Jacynta on the chat who can't seem to sign in. Wilfred. Let me get our tech person to...
Sorry, just give me a second. I'll just quickly fixing this problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we agree to just wait for Jacynta to log in, since she is our first speaker, please?
Thank you. I was just testing my mic if you can hear me loud and clear.
Yes, to me, loud and clear.
Okay.
While we wait, I will just once again read the main message for this session. Nature-based solutions for climate harness the power of nature to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and help us adapt to the impacts of climate change. They are win-win solutions that involve protecting, restoring, and sustainably managing ecosystems to address society's challenges and promote human well-being. So this session will focus on the role of young people in the Pacific in implementing and amplifying nature-based solutions in the Pacific while also addressing concerns at COP26. And these are the questions that our panelists will be speaking to us on. So the first question is, what role do young people play in community action, empowerment, and adapting towards nature-based solutions? What are some activities or projects that your organization has been working on? The second question is, what are some strategies and approaches towards communities and nature-based solutions? And how are you and your organization actively ensuring youth accompaniment mentoring in your work? So welcome, Jacynta. My apologies, I should have checked on you before I did the intro. So Jacynta is our first speaker for today. I will introduce her. And Jacynta is an Australian-born Samoan, journeyed with 350.org, began in 2014 for the Pacific Climate Warriors canoe blockade in Australia. Now currently working as the 350 Pacific campaigner, Jacynta hopes to inspire young leaders to discover their craft and use it to fulfill our shared responsibility to our people, land, and ocean. So now I give the floor to Jacynta. Okay.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for being so patient. I hope you all can hear me. Yeah, too many logins for hop in, but I'm in the right one, so it was definitely my fault. But yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm joining in from West Melbourne, so-called Australia. I'm on the unceded lands of the Wathaurong people, and I acknowledge the First Peoples of this country. So I want to pay my respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Where are we? So I am representing 350 Pacific, the Pacific Climate Warriors. And just quickly, it's a network, it's a grassroots-led movement that comprises of 15 Pacific Island nations. It spans across the diaspora communities, including US, New Zealand, and Australia. Many of our actions and campaigns have all been centered around storytelling, and it's a powerful source to the network, especially when it comes around to community organizing. So I'm not sure if you've already asked the questions. I can go ahead and respond to those questions, Rosi. Yeah. So in response to the first question, what role do people play in community action? Yeah, very quickly, young people play a big role, if not like the biggest role in community action and community empowerment, because yeah, they're in a position to becoming long-term contributors to the community. They are also the ones who can raise issues that affect young people, and something we notice a lot in history. That's always something that's kind of left out in a lot of big discussions. But long-term contributors, this is about young people also being the ones to inherit this world. So the processes that allow that to happen need to be protected, and this is a role for everyone in our community to play. So we all need to make sure that we are not only creating processes for knowledge to be shared, but we are also making sure that the structures that hold and protect these processes survive and are strong enough to hold all of that intergenerational knowledge. Some of the strategies and approaches that we use towards communities and nature-based solutions. So I mentioned earlier, a lot of our work is on storytelling. And we invest a lot into bringing stories from the front lines of climate into mainstream. We know that there are a lot of communities in the Pacific that are already practicing a lot of these things to adapt to the changes that we're seeing in our climate. And so our role has always been elevating that work to the world. But with 350 Pacific, our vision is to show the world that climate leadership means moving away from fossil fuels, embracing 100% community-led renewable energy, and ensuring the dignity of Pacific Islanders in a fair and just world. All of that is to say, I do have an example. I don't know if anyone has heard of tech packs. So there is a Solar Scholars training program that educates communities on integrating renewable energy in disaster preparedness and emergency response, and empowers graduates to train additional members of their community. So this is a project that we have been working towards for a little while now. It's led by Recharge Tech Packs, which is based in the Philippines. And this came out right after the Typhoon Yolanda in 2013. And these tech packs are basically like portable solar modules that are made for like off-the-grid power allocation. It increases disaster resilience through the Pacific Islands. Yeah, I think one thing we all know is that after a disaster, many communities impacted are off the grid for many days, even weeks. And so an initiative like this provides a sustainable, renewable response to power communications, lighting, medical, and all other energy needs. So this strategy is community-led. It also demonstrates regional collaboration. I don't know how I'm going for time because I already wasted so much, but I will end on, yeah, how do we ensure youth accompaniment and mentoring in our work? Training and skill sharing is a huge part in our movement. It's all about keeping it sustainable. Many of our warriors and community leaders hold a lot of knowledge, and so we ensure that we put pathways to allow that knowledge to be shared and to also contribute to a lot of our campaigns. And this is the role that storytelling plays in that. But yeah, our network of Pacific Climate Warriors is demonstrated through like the structure of like a fale in Samoan, but I think it's a traditional hut that you see a lot around the Pacific. The foundation and the top of the roof is like the first and final pieces of the structure, and that represents our warriors network. We use the pillars or the main beams to represent each of our regions that are in our network, and that connect our coordinators to our council of elders. So even the structures within our network represent a lot of traditions and culture, because it's easy to like understand and explain the relationship between our network. And all of that is taught through our training programs. And I think our movement has grown so much over the past few years because of that thing that we all have in common, and once we build that trust, we're able to like put in programs that we can empower a lot of our communities to also continue training and grow more leadership. And that's a big part of our mentoring. But I will leave it there and throw it back to you, Rosi.
Thank you, Jacynta. Thank you very much for sharing I picked out two main points from what you have discussed and the importance of storytelling. I think this is something that us as Pacific Islanders are known for and how knowledge is being passed on. So I think this is one of the things that we can highlight from what you have contributed to us. So thank you very much. I will move on now to our second speaker. Kathy, you're on next. Kathy Jetnil-Kijiner. So Kathy is a poet who serves as climate envoy for the Marshall Islands and co-founder and director of the Marshall Islands-based youth and environment nonprofit for Jo-Jikum. So Kathy, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Rosi. I hope I'm saying your name right. So thank you all for inviting me to speak today and to share some of our work at Jo-Jikum. So I'll just dive right in because just to make sure we have time for everyone. So in terms of the question about why youth, what role do youth play in community action and empowerment and adapting towards nature-based solutions? I think that young people play a really integral role. There's a creative energy and a flexibility of ideas and concepts and a power that is inherent with young people. You know, a lot of the cultural creations that are happening, like, and I don't necessarily just mean traditional culture, but like societal culture, you know, creating new forms of ideas, new fashion, new artwork, all of that comes from the creative energy of young people. And that's a power that I think a lot of people recognize, and it influences our societies in ways that we don't necessarily recognize either. So I think there is that kind of creative energy that's really important and valuable with young people. But it's not just that. I think they're also, that kind of creative thinking contributes towards solutions to issues that we might not necessarily recognize as a problem. And then, of course, one of the most vulnerable communities that's, you know, a part of our society are young people, and so they'll know best how to speak up for their own, for their demographic, and they know best how to advocate and what kinds of issues they want to, you know, they want to tackle and they want to see. And then besides this, I do know of a lot of young people who care like really deeply about their community, and the climate change, and much like the nuclear legacy too for the Marshall Islands, and even kind of the dismantling of patriarchy and racism within our societies, all of those are long games. You know, we're not going to solve it right away, and they're not necessarily going to be solved immediately. And so we need young people to be a part of that journey of fixing these societal issues, and you know, and continuing on that legacy as they grow and as they adapt, and as new information kind of enters our society. So these are some reasons why I think young people, and they also have a power to influence one another, and that's what shapes these movements and drives these movements forward. So that's part of what I see as a really important role that youth can play. For the Marshall Islands, nature-based solutions are still kind of a new concept in terms of that terminology, right? You know, we're looking at adaptation now and in developing our national adaptation plan at the governmental level. But when we think about adaptation, we discuss adaptation in terms of like really intense solutions like building islands, consolidating island communities, and finding out which islands are the most vulnerable. These are solutions that the Marshall Islands government is like honestly considering at the moment because of how dire the consequences of climate change are. So atolls in particular, we have nowhere else to go. So as we discuss these like really intense, hard adaptation solutions, you know, we are considering it, but that really changes the shape of our islands, right? You know, building a new island, elevating a new island, these are really extreme. Before we head into that direction, there's opportunities to still adapt using our cultural knowledge, using the environment, and a lot of times those kinds of solutions tend to help us take care of our environment a lot better. It helps us take care of our island a lot better. And it connects to our land. It connects us to our land. Because here in the Marshalls right now, there's still a lot of growing, there's still a lot of room for growth in terms of what kinds of nature-based solutions work for our island specifically. Like, for example, mangroves. Even though mangroves work in some islands, it doesn't work for us. We've tried it many times, and it just doesn't work, right? Another way is also like gardening. Like, gardening isn't necessarily like exactly adaptation, and yet in some ways it is, because of the global supply chains, being disrupted right now, and we're seeing that more and more, and getting worse as COVID, approaches. So gardening becomes a type of preparing ourselves for supplying our own needs. But it's a skill set that's still really new. And so it's a skill set that still a lot of Mauritius people don't actually engage in. Most of our population doesn't garden, actually. It's not as the way that you see it out in like Fiji, where there's tons of stalls of food that are constantly being sold on a daily basis. We don't have that. Most of our fruits and vegetables are shipped in, and they're expensive and inaccessible. So within Jo-Jikum, we have these kinds of programs that start out really small with gardening, and gardening is a way that we pair gardening with climate change courses that discuss what the difference is between mitigation and adaptation, and how even the small acts of gardening helps us with mitigation and adaptation as a way to contribute towards climate action right now. So it's like a small way that so that's like one very small program that we're doing with Jo-Jikum that's really relevant towards nature-based solutions is our gardening program. We partner with a wellness center here in the Marshall Islands, and they teach gardening classes on a weekly basis to our interns. Our interns are basically the staff and the core and the heart of the Jo-Jikum program. They maintain our youth center, they run and manage the logistics of each of our programs, and then in turn, they also learn about gardening, harvesting those fruits and vegetables, and then also even cooking them, because that's the final step that constantly gets left out, is a lot of people still don't really know how to eat the fruits and vegetables that they grow out here, because a lot of the fruits and vegetables that we grow, we didn't necessarily grow up with. A lot of the diet still consists of rice and canned meat. So there's like this whole revolution that's needed in terms of not just gardening, but also cooking and creating new recipes and understanding how to kind of feed your family and take back our health. So that's like one specific way. Then in terms of one of the questions where I think you said, we were asked, how are we actively ensuring youth accompaniment and mentorship in our work? So like I said earlier, there's a lot of, most of our staff is youth interns through the National Training Council. That's where we get our constant funding for interns that come through the program. We also make sure that each of our youth programs has funding for a youth co-lead. And the youth co-lead would partner with me as the director and also our program manager to actually implement and manage each of the programs so that they get training in not just participating in the program, but also managing and also implementing programs, which is really, an important skill set. So an important aspect of the work we do is really kind of an intergenerational exchange. So the way that I think of working with young people, because I don't necessarily see myself as a young person anymore, I think of it as an intergenerational exchange. I learn just as much from them as they learn from me. I try my best to be a bridge between the national government in my work as the climate envoy to make the work that we're doing at the national level accessible to our youth at a grassroots level. But we're also trying to figure out ways to incorporate young people youth representatives into the national level work and national level engagement in a more meaningful way. Because right now I'm working as a bridge between the two, but I think that there needs to be like an actual youth position at the policy level so that they can have access to some more of this information and they can have a representative to be meaningfully engaged. So there's really, there's kind of things we can fall into, traps we can fall into really easily in terms of working with young people when you're an adult. in constantly representing for them, in speaking for them rather than allowing them to speak for themselves, in tokenizing them, and making sure that we don't necessarily do that is like a constant battle, right? Is to make sure that we don't, that we're not tokenizing and using their youth and energy, you know, and then not actually giving them the power to control the narrative and to actually decide what kinds of investment our government makes. So just going to stop there. I hope that was clear enough, and I hope the Wi-Fi was clear. And yeah, I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy, for very knowledgeable sharing from your side. I think I liked what you said about the creative energy, you know, that young people can bring with the influence that they have to society. And when you mentioned something about gardening, you know, right now during the COVID in Fiji, like people are forced to resort to gardening. So it's sort of, you know, an adaptation strategy that people are trying to learn at the same time while adapting to. And now I will move on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Fred from Pacific Grove. Fred Fuakilau is a consulting partner with Protection Services from Pty Lotto based in Australia, and is business development consultant for Pacific Grove based in Fiji. He has extensive experience in water and agriculture sector. Fred has now developed his IoT smart metering experience towards digital agriculture and carbon emissions and cleaning cooking energy through home biogas projects and water conservation through drip irrigation. From a mechanical engineering and business development background, Fred continues to drive his favorite rule of thumb in any field he sees an opportunity to develop. You cannot manage what you cannot measure. Thank you, Fred. The floor is now yours.
Thank you, Rosie. Thank you, everybody. Warm greetings, everyone, in Bolasia from Lufuni North in Mombasa. I'm trying to share my screen. If that's okay. Our tech person in the back end. Or do you want to share the presentation from your end? I do not have the access to share my screen. Okay, no.
Sorry, I think the screen share has just been activated again.
That's fine. Thank you very much, Wilfred. Can you guys all see my presentation? Yes,
Thanks, Fred. Yes.
All right, thanks. Thank you. So Pacific Grove is from a private sector business. We started in Fiji from 2018, and we've been in the agriculture and the carbon emission space. So we're grateful to be part of this Youth for Pacific Tree Crop Gathering under the thematic space of community and nature-based solutions. So to answer, I'm going to present a few slides just to answer the questions that was given to the panelists. So basically our mission is to empower farmers to promote organic food security in the Pacific in this era of climate change, right? So we like to empower the traditions of our community with technology. So our three-piece concept is to safeguard nature and safeguard society, which involves people, planet, and profit. So when we work with communities, we talk to them about the flight to climate crisis, the path to zero emissions. So when it comes to fighting climate crisis, we all know that carbon dioxide often gets the most attention, right? But it is not the only thing that's warming our planet. Other highly potent pollutants like methane, ground level, ozone, HFCs, and black carbon. They can heat up our atmosphere at a rapid rate. So, for example, methane emissions from natural gas production, agricultural production, and landfills. They warm the planet with an intensity of 86 times that of carbon dioxide over 20-year period horizon. Because these gases, pack such a big punch, they are sometimes called super pollutants, and they are a huge deal. So when we go to community level, we enter the community level through the carbon, through the path to zero emission space, through SDG 7, which underpins on all the 17 SDGs, mostly the first 5, which is no poverty, SDG 1, zero hunger, SDG 2, good health, SDG 3, quality education, SDG 4, and gender equality, SDG 5. So Pacific Group offers solutions that requires nature resources through SDG 7 for the community to realize the potential of resources around them. So the bottom-up approach is our youth, our Pacific community. So our what and whys is what I'm going to touch base on to answer the 3 questions that was posed to us for the panelists. Our climate action, we call it our low-hanging fruits. We would like, we always aim at the improving energy efficiency. That's our low-hanging fruit through low carbon excess coal benefits. It ties across the clean energy and transportation. It ties, as I mentioned before, it ties on, it underpins on all 17 sustainable development goals. And our second low-hanging fruit is sustainable agriculture and food security, in particularly regenerative agriculture. So the benefits of our technology is how I'm going to talk about how the system works. So you're using food scraps, you're using animal waste, cow, pig, and you feed it into the system that really produces methane gas for you to cook, and also gives you liquid biofertilizer that's rich in micro and macronutrients. So the benefits of this, it's a holistic benefit as a whole for our community, and also to safeguard the society, and also safeguard us humans. Firewood, for example, you're saving the forest biodiversity. You're saving the marine coastal morphology in terms of pig waste being washed out to the coastal reefs. And then the financial incentive here is there's a lot of cost benefit. LPG prices has increased 4 or 5 times over the past 3 months due to this pandemic. And this is the right time where these kind of solutions are empowering our community for them to use whatever is around them to make their own energy. And the uptake is so positive. It's so positive because it teaches them to be resilient towards cooking food shocks, and it teaches them to preserve food scraps from the kitchen that goes to the landfill. And then the last one is reduced indoor air pollution. Talking about household air pollution, this is totally different benefit entirely. There's about 3.8 million that die prematurely every year from household air pollution, and this is huge. This is huge. So our intervention in the community using our technology is to hit the mindset of our community using nature, using resources around them. That will have enormous benefits to our health, through our income, through our financial security, our food security, and also through our environment, and also our health for the woman. One of the key things that we Pacific are bringing to this Youth for Pacific pre-COP gathering is the introduction of green school concept into primary and secondary school. So we hit the mindset of our future generations from the outset. So that's and another benefit of this is the ability for farmers or young generations or communities to use the fertilizer to support the soil health. chemicals can have a detrimental effect to our society in terms of climate, in terms of our health, and also the food we eat, the nutrient that we feed into our system. So the other added byproduct that comes out of this biofertilizer, biogas, is the biofertilizer, which helps farmers increase yields while protecting the environment at the same time. Moving on, we also work with communities to teach them the green circular process that advocates circular economy, just to teach them on the importance of how the green circular process works in terms of this biogas and the circular economy. I hope my slides are changing.
No, they're not, Fred.
Oh my gosh, I'm almost done. Okay, how about now?
Yep.
Yes, they're changing now.
Or I think I'll just leave it this way. So I'm just going to go back to how our system works. Sorry, I'm going to start from the low-hanging fruits. Our low-hanging fruit into climate action is improving energy efficiency and also sustainable agriculture and food security, regenerative agriculture. So how our system works is it preserves, it saves the forest biodiversity through reduced deforestation. It also saves the coastal morphology or the marine diversity from preventing the waste from going down the washing out from the washout to the coastal environment. Yeah? And the additional benefits of this financially, food security, waste management, and also reduced air pollution that affects women and children. Stats says that 3.8 million die prematurely every year from household air pollution. And this is another added benefit to using whatever that's around us to make your own energy that can save us in the long run. So one of the things that coming to this gathering is we want to introduce green school concept into primary and secondary schools. We want to hit the mindset from the outset of our future generations using green school economy, green school concept, circular economy as well. And one thing I wanted to mention is the ability of the benefit of the systems to support soil health. You're not using chemical fertilizers anymore. You're improving the soil biodiversity as well. That in turn improves the health of a person and gives the farmers a good return in terms of yields and protecting the environment at the same time. So when we talk to our communities, we try and promote the green circular process, getting them to on a hands-on approach to advocate the circular economy using Pacific Grow's inputs. There can be no climate justice without trade justice. Listening to the leadership of small-scale farmers and young generations is important to us. We work with farmers to really not only give our solutions to them, but we also provide a market that's also fair for them, that will give them return in the long run. So like one of the FNU lecturers has used our system into his Agwood farm, and it's really improved his soil pH. These are some of the customer testimonials here in Fiji, promoting off-grid cooking, and also how the system, how using nature can save you money from buying LPG 4 times a year, and also how it helped you our farmers be self-energy sustainable because of the lockdowns. You didn't have to go to buy LPGs or travel from outer islands to buy LPG and kerosene because they're making their own energy using the natural resources. We have development partners working with us all over the Pacific and also around the world. Our upcoming developments in this climate action space is using human waste. Yeah, I said that, human waste, to generate your own energy from home biogas. These are other developments that I just wanted to share with us all in this space. And then anyone who's doing climate finance knows that lowering barriers to enter capital markets is a huge task. So we are moving further into monitoring or quantifying the amount of gas an end user can save that can also be value added through carbon abatement at the end of the year. And this has been approved by UNFCCC and Gold Standard as well, the two leading carbon markets in the world. And it's entirely exciting space to work with end users, our farmers, the young generations using natural resources around them. We actually, benefiting in terms of carbon trade-offs. So the big concept for us was to try and underpin on all 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which you've seen in our slides. So for Pacific Grow, our climate action is aiming at our low-hanging fruits. We want to advance a just and inclusive community that's to transition to clean energy, cooking using nature, self-made energy, and also integrate practical initiatives such as green circular economy and clean energy through the rural communities and education system. A just energy transition builds on local people's ideas and involvement, creates green jobs, and invests in local solutions. Thank you all. I apologize for my slides. Hinaka.
Thank you, Fred. I think you shared very insightful information on how farmers can be responsible with the environment as well. And I like the concept of introducing it to the school, as this is a way of passing the knowledge down to younger generations and empowering young people, educating them at a young age, like you said. And I guess the powerful message from Fred is there can be no climate justice without trade justice. I think that's our phrase for that. Moving on to our next speaker, we have Noelene Nabulivou. Noelene works for over 35 years as a feminist, activist, and community organizer, especially as director of DIVA for Equality, Fiji, for the past 10 years, working in urban, poor, and especially maritime areas of Fiji, the Pacific, and globally. Her identity and ancestry includes an Itoke father from Nabulivou, Fiji, and mother of Australian English origin. She works on many areas of human rights and social, economic, and ecological justice, especially for women, non-binary people, and to push back against fundamentalism and colonialities of all kinds. Noelene, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Rosi, and I'm really enjoying the session. Thanks very much, everyone, so far. I'm just going to try and share my slides. I think it's working. Let me just see if I can find the right window. Okay. Yes, it's having a bit of problems finding the. Can I just ask Wilfred if you can just share my slides, because literally, if you can just scroll through them very, very quickly. It's just to introduce. One of the things I wanted to do was to say, like, when we're speaking about nature-based systems, it really is a contested idea, you know, like the idea of nature-based systems can be used by many, many people in different ways. And I thought it's kind of useful, you know, thinking how Jacynta talked about earlier about storytelling, to be kind of clear on when someone like me, who's working as part of a feminist grassroots intergenerational collective and civil society organization, uses that term. That's one kind of way we use it, but obviously there might be different civil society that use it. There might be different kinds of governments and political parties who use the same concept in very, very different ways, and of course corporations. So can I just get you to cycle through very, very fast, Wilfred, and I'll just kind of pick on things as we go through. Just keep going and I'll just speak to it. So, I mean, just the idea that, you know, we know that we're having to adapt both to what's happening around us right now as Pacific Climate Frontline peoples and as those all over the world who are doing it, but that there are also kind of ongoing inequalities and separations between people. There are things like every day 200 people, 200 species are becoming extinct. There are different kinds of politics, you know, within the movement, but also in terms of ethnic diversity, in terms of religious diversity, whether you're living in a urban sector, whether you're living in a poor rural community, whether you're living in maritime areas, and what part of the Pacific you might be living in, whether you're in Australia and New Zealand or a settler community within and indigenous peoples on the same land. We can speak about always were, always will be indigenous land, but it's one thing to do that when you have a settler state on top of it. So that's why talking about the colonialities and the many realities that we live every day is really, really important. If we can just go back one slide, yes, just this one. One of the things that that I'd like to kind of just raise is nature-based solutions have to come from those who have the solutions, right? And they have to be about people defining, majority peoples around the world defining for themselves, for ourselves, what it means to come up with different tactics, short-term tactics, but also long-term strategies that are about holding ground, that are about resisting false solutions, and that are about creating something that is just and ecologically sound and I would say moving in the way that we create something that is just and real for communities. So that's really, without controlling the slides myself, I just wanted to raise some of those issues and show us visually what I talk about. Because if we're looking at how, you can put that away if you like, Wilfred, thanks for that. When someone like DIVA for Equality and our networks are talking about nature-based solutions, we're talking about things like rewilding of ecosystems. We're talking about people-based food solutions, alternative food solutions, as we've kind of heard Fred and others talk about now. We're talking about ecosystem repair, about maybe fruit forests. We're talking about ocean health. We're talking about approaches to seawalls that aren't just about sticking cement somewhere and hoping that it's going to keep being there over time. I mean, one of the interesting experiences that we just had was there's a set of work that we've just been going through with my own village in Kandavu. They've been waiting for a bridge to be built from 2016. Within 2 weeks, we worked with the community and we were able to rebuild not just one bridge, but 3 bridges. And for me, that's really the difference, is that if you kind of take a development approach that is detached from people. If you imagining that someone will come in with technical skills and do that work, then that really is a very slow, awkward, often co-optive, and really can also be a very disempowering experience. So there's a different kind of set of definitions that we need to think about in terms of nature-based systems. We might be thinking about climate resilient crops, as we've spoken about already. It might be around what is the difference between using an endemic species or an invasive introduced species. Sorry, my computer is doing some very weird things. Okay, and one of the things that corporations do is now we've got these entities that are talking about building these nature-based system units, and they're going to build nature-based solutions that are products, and they're finding ways to be clearer on the carbon measurements, on how much carbon is held in one particular area, and on the trading on that carbon. And I'd be really interested to talk to Fred and many others about how do we weave our way through some of these really delicate situations. We want to be able to both work within systems that are available now to people, but we have to be really careful about how we get caught and co-opted within those systems. So there's now discussions by some corporations that nature-based systems are actually a new asset type, I mean, imagine that, taking what we've already done to our ecosystems at a local level and our ecospheric systems, the entire ways. There's only 30% of rainforest left in the world now, you know? We are slowing down our oceanic currents. We are oceans people, and here we are. The damage that is being done at a global level to our nitrogen cycle, to all of these things that are the boundaries within which us and every other living species on this planet has to negotiate our way through. And yet we are allowing corporations still, in this time when we're in, you know, the most fearful but also hopeful and resistant culture, is that we're allowing some of them to keep defining for us what a nature-based solution is. And I think we have to be really careful, because one of the things is that what they're trying to do is to come up with other ways to make money. It's still around this issue of neoliberal capitalism. And it's about saying, oh, now that all our fossil fuel assets are stranded, you know, the idea of stranding is that it's no longer relevant, that it's becoming less relevant because we are having to change. The entire economic system around the world is having to change. So as they know that their assets are becoming stranded, they're looking for other so-called solutions. They're not solutions at all. And one of the things that's incredibly amazing to me is we've just had an announcement from China, right? Overnight at the UN General Assembly, that says that China no longer is going to be involved in any coal-based activity outside their country. It's going to be interesting now to look at the analysis of what that means, but that's massive. That is a massive shift, because we're not talking about a slow transition anymore. This is a massive power that is saying, oh, okay, we change this now, and announcing it at the UN General Assembly. Now, of course, immediately all kinds of stock variations will happen. There will be fear, there will be all sorts of negotiations going on behind the scenes about what this means. But for us who are thinking about nature-based strategies and ecologically sound strategies, we have to be clear on what we mean by that, how we participate in these. So the next, just keep me on time, Rosi. When I get close to time, if you can just wave, that'd be great. So one of the things is that we have to, you know, we have to, hang on, sorry, I'm looking at my notes. I really wanted to be honest in the way that I come into this discussion, because you can be on a panel and you can go, yes, nature-based solutions, or you can say, actually, I have a really deep problem with that term, you know, and as someone who's trying to be kind of as strong and as ethical and as principled in my own personal organizing, but also DIVA for Equalities, we have to know what we are going to do about that. Because this is one example of something that started, for instance, the idea of nature-based solutions came out of some work by IUCN. And there's also been some work by academics at Oxford. Now, who's to say? I'm sure it began with the best of intentions, but as with everything, and we know this from gender work, we know this from economic work, any term can be taken and then co-opted. And that is one of the things that we have to be very clear about, is who is using this within the UNFCCC system, who is using it in corporatized systems, because the problem is around when we start to commodify everything, and we have known this for decades. Indigenous people have known it for millennia. The minute that you start to reduce something to just what it means in terms of trade, then you're in trouble. Because what you are doing is saying everything else that represents, the fact that it just is enough for it to be in the world is not enough anymore. It has to have some kind of commodified value. How you produce it matters. How you distribute it matters. How you consume it matters. So we have to kind of get under all of these terms, just like we have had to do with loss and damage. The only reason that loss and damage is still being talked about at the international level is because majority South peoples, including Pacific Islanders, have said you have to speak about this. You cannot take this off the agenda. It is about historical responsibility. It is about imperialization and capitalization. So I think, just to close, we have to be really, really clear that what we are saying is that, as Martin Luther King said, if it's an unjust law, if it's something that is unjust, then we must oppose it. We have a duty to oppose it. So as we head into COP26, I just really want to encourage us. The things that might sound pretty sometimes are not, and sometimes are the things that we most deeply have to change. So thank you for the opportunity to share that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Noelene, for the very powerful message that you shared with us today. I think Noelene has shared a lot of powerful message for us to remember. And I like the idea of how your paternal side from Kandavu, how you mobilize local people to build the bridges. I think that stood out not only for me, but for all of us that are listening. Shows the power of the people and young people also who are helping in their own ways. So now I will open the floor for questions. I am going on the Q&A tab, but I don't see a question. To all our participants, I'm opening the floor for questions to our speakers. We have allocated 70 minutes for this. And straight after that, we will wrap up. So any questions? But at the same time, we've also left this time for the panels. If you want to further discuss on the thematic track, you're open to do so.
I think maybe the only little bit that I would add at the end, Rosi, if that's okay, is I think what we're all trying to do is to kind of live within many worlds, you know, like I'm trying, one of the things I'm trying to do all the time, like as a lifelong learner, is I'm upskilling myself on economic solutions, because one of the things I think where kind of corporatization gets us is that it makes us feel like that's the only way forward. And actually, we have alternatives. And I love some of the work that's being done by what they call degrowth specialists. And I thought, you know, like heading into COP26, some of the things we have to be a lot clearer on is what are our visions for the future? Like when we're working, you know, if it's, you know, young people, whoever, women, men, transgender people who are working around the world on different strategies. One of the things that I'm kind of thinking is we have to live in pluriverses. We have to find you know, what Kathy said earlier about it has to be highly contextual, because what works even from Fiji to RMI is not the same, even from Fred in Lambasa, you know, proposing for somewhere else. But there might be something specific to Lambasa or specific to Kandavu or specific to Madang in Papua New Guinea. And then you also you have to link social and economic justice, because if you're proposing anything on climate change now in West Papua, that has to also be about human rights and stopping the genocide, right? So it's almost like every single contextual frame that we have around the world has to be fitting together, but also having its own place. So it's like pluriverses. So I just wanted to introduce that because we've been doing a lot of thinking in feminist movements about that lately. Thanks.
Thank you, Noelene. Any other of our panels would like to add on something?
I'm seeing Q&A, but I was just going to say, can I add a little bit about some of the programs that we've been doing, actually? Because I didn't really get into the programs. I was just more focusing on the values that guide our work. So just a few programs to run through is we have something called the Climate Change in Arts Camp, where we teach arts and advocacy to high school students, you know, in the summers. And lately we've partnered with the Ministry of Health so that it became a climate and health arts seminar. And so we explore the intersections between climate change and health. And so this year we had some really interesting conversations about how COVID intersects with climate change, and then also mental health issues, and also impacts on our agriculture and our diet. So there's that. Then we also have the Earth Champions program, where we teach youth, we select youth from every village to be an Earth Champion. and they learn about about the environmental issues, about different kinds of solutions, and then they actually learn grant writing, and they're given up to $4,000 to implement a project in their own village, so that they get project management skills as well. So that's one program. And then we also have the digital storytelling workshop. There's no classes right now that actually teaches media and how to take videos or how to create any sort of media out here. There's none. So we try to have this every summer. It's like a summer camp, another summer camp for youth, on how to create their own stories and their own videos. And then we also have environmental artists in residence, where we recruit artists and we teach them about the different environmental issues, and they create new artwork based off of that. And that's another program that's kind of its own program, because there's no artists in residence that we have so far out here. We partner regularly with the Nuclear Commission to work on the nuclear legacies and to support the March 1st Nuclear Day activities on a regular basis. And then, now we have in the process a climate diplomacy program, where we're going to get a little bit more in depth into the UNFCCC process, climate activism, and what work is going on at the national level. So, okay, I'll stop there.
Thanks, Kathy. I'm checking the Q&A tab, and I'm not receiving any questions.
I think there's a couple from Alisi. Yeah.
I think that's under the event.
Okay.
I'm looking at our session. Oh, finally, okay. I'll start.
Sorry.
Okay, I can see some questions here. So one question is, I think this question is for Noelene. How important is decolonizing the climate space?
Oh my goodness. How important is it to everything, right? And decolonizing ourselves.
Oh no, I think we lost Noelene there. Sorry, people, because we are running out of time, I will just pick a few questions randomly. I apologize in advance if I'm not able to pick all your questions, but please feel free to email the panels directly if you have any questions. But I have one here. Not a nature-based question, but Fred may be able to answer this. Wondering if you know anything about Fiji's insurance for small farmers?
Thank you, Moderator. Thank you for the question. I'm not really well versed with the space of insurance for small farmers, but it's open to the floor for people to answer the question as well. But that's a really interesting element to also think about when you're working with farmers. But yeah, thank you for that. It's also a learning curve for me.
Thank you, Fred. Move on to the next question. What do you find worries the youth communities you work within the most? This is, I think it's open to any panelist who's willing to answer. I'll just repeat the question again. What do you find worries the youth, the communities you work within most in the area?
All right, I'll go ahead. I think the biggest obstacle is for them to take that step into the new climate change mitigation and adaptation space. For some of the youths that we work with, they're just too scared to take that step. So that's where we come in. We try and show them the proof of concept that Because in Fiji, I don't know if you know the other Pacific Islands, but in Fiji we see to believe it. When we see to believe it, only then we want to move into the paradigm shift. That's from my end. Rosi.
Thank you, Fred. Maybe I will give it back to Noelene, who was cut off
I'm
to
sorry.
finish
It's
her
just
answer.
one
It's
of
okay.
those days for me and technology. Apologies. You know, I was just going to say that in terms of coloniality, it's a different word to colonized. You know, like colonized is almost like it's happened and it's done, but coloniality is about what remains. And one of the things that I'm interested in is I don't even think it's neo-colonialism. I think it's the same. I think it's imperialism, and it's in everything that we do. One of the things that as a radical feminist we talk about every day is like every day we have to wash the patriarchy off us, you know, and we start the new day as a cycle. Well, it's the same thing with coloniality as well, you know, like we have to kind of re-examine all the time, where is it in our bodies, where is it in our heads. I mean, and we're living that. Like I lived in a time when I really wasn't encouraged to speak my, you know, my indigenous language. I was encouraged to go to Suva grammar school, and I was included, you know, encouraged to be as good as I could be in English. I also think it was part of my, you know, my mom trying to keep something of herself in our family, you know, like, so it's also about things like personal relationships with people. So I think all of us have to look at this as a lifelong journey and not kind of just do this binary, I'm indigenous, you're not indigenous, they're doing, you know, the right thing, you're not doing the right thing. We have to have those nuanced, hard conversations about what does coloniality look like and how do we keep doing that every day, examining and reimagining what it is to be human, but also to be part of various cultures and our individual intersectional identities. Thanks.
Thank you, Noelene. Maybe I will throw another 2 questions before we end this session. With the interest of time, I apologize I'm not able to every question. Question here is, should we be promoting a more plant-based diet in the Pacific? Something that can be done on an individual level? I think any of the panelists can answer this question.
Anybody gonna answer?
Fred, no.
You're on a roll, Noelene. I'll let you take it.
Hey, and I don't know, Jacynta's gone, I think also. I would just say, yes, we have to. I would say it's not the only thing, because it's like taking your eye off the gaze. You have to have, you know, we have to disrupt agribusiness. We have to do that. And that means that we have to think about, you know, where are the methane emissions and where are the ways that we can eat in a different way. So, of course, we have to, more plant-based diets. But much more important than that, even right now, is let's get rid of all these extractive corporations that really are killing us and other species, 200 a day around the, you know, around the world, and this entire planetary system. Focus on that, and also on plant-based diets and everything else that we have to do. I mean, the pollution, the plastics pollution and everything else, you know, chemicals pollution, so much we have to change. Thank you.
Just adding on to Noelene, yes, I agree with Noelene as well. We can promote a more plant-based diet in the Pacific. We have the solutions to do it, but we gotta start somewhere. You know, we gotta start somewhere that has a really a big impact. We have a lot of good ideas. We have a lot of good solutions, ideas in marketplace that we can do, but you gotta start somewhere, and this is a platform for it. Thank you.
Thank you, panelists. Now for the last question before we close this session. What do you find most difficult to engage? I think I asked that. Oh, yes. Sorry. What do you find most difficult to engage your communities within your field?
I've answered. Yeah, I've answered. Maybe Noelene can give it off.
I think just pushing back against those who have hierarchical power, whether that's government, whether that's people in our own communities, including, you know, based on age, whether that's men, whether that's corporations, anyone who, you know, says they have the solution, but we're not so sure that that's going to help us all in the long run. That means we have to build our power of resistance. That means we have to be, you know, kind of able to assertively do that. And that's not easy over time. So part of what we're doing in the next session in DIVA is talking about some of those, I don't know, skills and new ways of thinking that we require in order to speak back and to act back in different ways. Thank you.
Noelene. Thank you, Noelene. Thank you, everyone. I think that we have come to the end of our session for today. I would like to once again thank the panelists. I think 2 has already left us, but thank you very much for your time. And is it okay to ask the participants if they have any further questions to email directly with the panelists? Okay. Yes. So everyone, if you have any other further questions that you would like to ask the panelists, please send them a message directly. And just guiding you into a few takeaways from this session, as we have heard from all our speakers today. Young people as long-term contributors, I think that's one of the key messages for today, and also bringing creative energy of young people into solutions that cannot be solved now. So young people play a vital role in this because they are the future generations. And also introducing concepts to younger people in terms of nature-based solutions, and also an important message that Noelene shared with us on development, most development approaches that detach people. I think this was a very powerful thing to reflect on, is commodifying solutions and rooting it so that we can see actions on the ground. I hope I have summed that up well, and that ends our sessions today. And I will now close the session. If you want to join the workshops in the next session, please feel free to do so. That's it from me and the panelists. Thank you very much and have a very nice day. Naka.